Well, that concludes the presentations for this morning. Do we want to take a break now, Tom? First of all, I'll just say this, and I'm very proud of the fact that in 1977, I started at the bottom at Alaska Airlines. You can pretty much take the bottom out of that. I ran an X-ray machine back when Alaska Airlines was still running an X-ray machine and went from there. The truth of the matter is it helps us because what the visitor experience is all about is showing the visitor a good time, and that's the important part. And I'm very proud of the fact that's where I started. Well, thanks for this great opportunity, and I'm not quite sure what we want to do here. Do you want me to just try to slide through this as quick as I can? Do you want to take a break now, Tom? Or okay, we'll roll with it. First and foremost, it's a great opportunity to be back in my home state. I was born here. And what I'm going to try to do today is just give you a little bit of a background about the Alaska Travel Industry Association, our legislative experiences, and maybe some insight for you as you're moving forward for the promotion to a great state, the second best state in the Union, way above California. But I know there's been a lot of talk about how you got here today, and my recommendation to you is real straightforward. In the words of Don Henley, get over it. You need to move forward and take some insight from hopefully what Mike and what I can try to give you, some thoughts about how you can move forward and address finding a good solution for your state. And it probably will be a hybrid of what Mike talks about and what I talk about. Next slide, please. Before I get started, though, I want to tell you two things. Bill, I actually drove that trip that you were talking about in the oogling and looking at all the beautiful sights in eastern Washington. The truth of the matter is, though, I didn't get off the road, and the local Mountie pulled me over. Thought I was drinking, and I hadn't even imbibed in any wine yet. But it's beautiful country, and again, you should be very proud of the state of Washington. And before I get into the specifics, I just want to say this motley-looking group of 7+1 makes an annual trek every year, 17 years. A quarter of us do not live in this state, so we add to your local economy. If you don't know that, that's Steamboat Rock State Park. We have a great time, and it's a good example of what the visitor industry is all about. We golf, we ski, we try to ski because we're all too old, drink a little bit of beer, so we're adding to your local economy, and that's really what the visitor industry is all about, and we have a great experience in eastern Washington. Next slide. So what I want to do today, very briefly, I want to talk about what Alaska Travel Industry is, how we got where we are, what we do, give you some thoughts for consideration about what you might think about, maybe some comparisons about Alaska and Washington, and give you some recommendations that I call working with or through your wonderful legislature. And then again, I think at the end, I'm not going to take commendations, questions and comments until the very end. But hopefully we'll give you some insight into some different models and concepts for your funding and for your infrastructure. And hopefully moving forward, and I would suggest you don't need to do this overnight, but over the next period, maybe 12, 18 months, come up with the right model for the state of Washington. Next slide. First of all, just some background, and I'm a little embarrassed, but just remember, he comes from a state of 38 million. We have 700,000. So our visitor numbers are going to be a little bit different, but nonetheless, the visitor industry is hugely important to Alaska. We are tied with fishing as the #2 most important economic sector, private sector in the state of Alaska. We're about a $1.6 billion industry, direct economic spend. With indirect economic spend, that's about double that, about $3.4 billion. I don't even want to tell you that you all know in this room, I'm sure, that oil is king in Alaska. And the fact is that, you know, they're 85% of our state revenue. So, but just as you look at these numbers, we were on a pretty good trend going through the recession, and then we've had a pretty heavy falling off for the last year. And going into 2010, we knew that we would be over 140,000 visitors down right out of the chute because we had a loss of cruise ship deployments. They moved their ships to other destinations. Based on past travel research, the average visitor expenditure in the state of Alaska is about $935. Our average stay in Alaska is about 9 days, so it's a little bit different than your state. And yes, the Germans and the Aussies spend a lot of time, so if I were marketing, I'd go after them. About 14% of our visitors are international. So real briefly, what is Alaska Travel Industry Association? We are a nonprofit trade association, but I just want to give you a little bit of a background about how we got where we are prior to 2000. In the 90s, tourism marketing funding in the state of Alaska was very volatile. In the early 90s, we had, frankly, a budget of pushing $20 million then, which was huge. But also very low as $5 to $6 million. Our friends in the legislature couldn't decide what to do with us, and we saw a lot of changes. We also had really 3 different organizations that were involved in travel and promotion. 2 of them were state organizations, the Alaska Tourism Marketing Council, which promoted domestically to consumer marketing in North America, and the state of Alaska's Division of Tourism, which did the international marketing and worked on trade, tour operators and travel agents. In addition, we had another trade organization, the Alaska Visitors Association, who advocated for our members, but at the same time they sold the vacation planner on behalf of the state of Alaska because constitutionally the state couldn't do it. So we had these 3 organizations that existed. They were inefficient, ineffective, with too many executives and administration layering. In the late 90s, a new concept was put forth, and ultimately it was approved by our legislature. The concept was fairly simple: to reduce overhead and actually the bureaucracy and number of employees employed by the state of Alaska, and to obtain a strong public-private partnership. A new concept was formed. Plus, the idea at that point was that we were going to also have a much more stronger base level of solid funding over the years. So in 2000, the Millennium Plan was passed. ATMC as an organization went away. The Division of Tourism was reduced to a much smaller Office of Tourism, and a new trade association, or ATI, was organized. And it was a trade group. We advocate for our members, but we are also a marketing organization, so we have a distinct marketing group entity. Annually, we are awarded, as that qualified trade association, the contract to market and promote Alaska as a destination. And we've been doing that for the past 11 years. Next slide, please. So there's been some good and some bad and what I call some ugly in this whole situation, and I'll go through that fairly briefly. But first of all, we've had a very good and strong, vibrant public-private partnership with the state of Alaska. We report to them quarterly. We have, similar to what Mike said, very open, transparent meetings. All of our marketing committee meetings are open to anyone, whether they're a member of ATIA or just interested in the visitor industry. And so that's been very good. And the results, I absolutely believe, have been that our marketing efforts, whether we have had a large budget or a small budget, have been effective because we've been industry-led for the last 10, 11 years. We've been research-based and market-driven. And we've been able to raise the overall awareness of Alaska as a destination and raise the interest in people coming to Alaska. And I just want to touch on that briefly, and I agree with Mike totally. Our job as that state organization is to raise the awareness and the interest of our great state. And let's not worry about which destination gets more people or where they're going to go. That's the job of your local DMOs and your local CVBs to do that work. But ultimately what we want to do is increase the pie, as Mike said. Next slide. So some of the bad. This isn't, that first point, match requirements have changed. We have a match requirement right now, so we literally have to generate hard dollars by businesses who buy into our program, advertise on our website, utilize our vacation planner. We distribute in excess of, we will distribute in excess of 500,000 vacation planners to interested parties, participate in our direct mail and our travel trade shows. So we have to generate this year $2.7 million. Unlike other states who dole grants out, we actually, our DMOs and CVBs believe in us enough that they actually participate by contributing a percentage of their marketing dollars into our program. So that part has demonstrated that we've got good buy-in from the industry, but we've had a bit of a battle, more than a bit of a battle, and frankly, even though we have $11 billion in savings reserve in the state of Alaska right now, we're going through a huge budget battle to maintain our budget level right here this year. So I believe part of that is we have not always had what I call an identifiable source of funding. In other words, it comes from the general fund. And that came from the general fund in 2000, basically because we didn't have a substantial number of taxes. But since that plan occurred, we literally have not had one tax imposed on us, but 5 different taxes. A car rental vehicle tax that was imposed on us, which, by the way, says we should be using that for tourism marketing, although it doesn't always get there. And then our citizenry, my fellow citizens in their infinite wisdom, passed a tax or ballot initiative that imposed 4 additional taxes on the cruise ship industry. End result is we, even though I'm very proud of what we do and how we do it and what our organization is, continue to have funding battles. So the ugly. Next slide. I ultimately think that really what's happened to a certain degree, and in some cases you have legislators who just don't get it, frankly, that because we as an industry were not, we've always said we were in favor of a statewide, broad-based, fair and equitable sales tax. We came out in opposition to those different taxes. At the end of the day, you have legislators who just say, you know what, you weren't in favor of those taxes, so why the heck do you think you should get that money? Even though it's generated and it's obvious that it comes directly from the visitor industry. Get a clue, dude. But that has been a real battle for us because legislators will say, you weren't in support of it, now you're asking me for the money. So they haven't always recognized that. And frankly, we have continuing battles and ongoing dialogue with those respective legislators, and frankly, in some cases, unfortunately, they're in leadership House Finance Chair positions, which creates real problems.